where are the chantings? Can you hear me? Is it recording? Oh, okay. Good morning, everyone. Both those who are here and those who are listening far away. I won't belabor the point of why we're doing this. You all know why you're here. You all made some effort. In the cases of a couple of you made considerable effort to get here. So you certainly know why you're here. You don't need me to tell you. But just to fill in the forms, we are studying the 5 chapters, which are the principal, not the only, but the principal prayers to Guru Rinpoche found in the Terma of Barway Dorje. And the reason that we use these is because we want to mix our mind with Guru Rinpoche's. And this means that our mind, each and every one of our minds, has always been identical, actually, to Guru Rinpoche's. But we need to come to believe that. And that's why we pray. So ultimately, as you'll see as we go through, we're ultimately praying to ourselves. As the Buddha himself said, your ultimate refuge is yourself. You take refuge in your own future Buddhahood. You take refuge in the Dharma you embody, and you take refuge in yourself as the Sangha, ultimately. The source in this tradition of the 5 chapters is the text that's called Clear Guidance on the Generation Stage. And it is, they are often extracted from that and packaged as a separate liturgy, in which case they are, as probably, as you've seen if you downloaded what was made available on the website, they're put inside a very short Guru Yoga used as a template for them. The Guru Yoga is an adaptation of a Guru Yoga written by Barway Dorje for other purposes and was slightly altered to suit this purpose. I'm not going to go through the Guru Yoga because Lama Yeshe taught it very recently in his ongoing teachings on the songs of Barway Dorje. However, that is not the only way we can use these. They can be recited separately, individually, or in combination with one another in any format you wish. They can be included in any form of Guru Rinpoche practice, either at the beginning or after the repetition of the mantra. And of course, most famously, the fifth of the 5 chapters, the one that we'll not be discussing because it's very short and because Lama Yeshe taught it, he taught the Munro of this tradition, is the central part of the Guru Yoga in the Munro or preliminary practices that many of you have done. The 5 chapters are a response to a request, as those who've studied the complete or the clear guidance will remember, a request that there be supplications or prayers addressed to the outer, inner, secret, and very secret mandalas of Guru Rinpoche as found in this tradition. And then the 5th one is kind of a summary of the first 4. The reason for looking at the liturgies, at the prayers themselves this weekend, is that while Barway Rinpoche went through the source text, the clear guidance, actually in this room many years ago, he went through it quite quickly because it was designed to be completed in a weekend. And because the clear guidance itself is so dense in briefly stating or giving a lot of rather profound and for many of us initially unfamiliar material, it still requires considerable unpacking on our part. So this weekend, what we'll do is we'll go through each of the 4 longer supplications of these, of this set of 5, the 5th having already been explained years ago by Lama Yeshe. So this morning we'll go through what's called the supplication to the outer mandala, this afternoon the inner mandala, tomorrow morning the secret mandala, and tomorrow afternoon the very secret mandala. The outer mandala here, with which we'll be concerned this morning, is, for those of you who are familiar with the basic Guru Rinpoche practice of this tradition, is the external mandala of that practice. So it is the Guru Rinpoche in the form of his Trikaya, or 3 bodies, surrounded by the 8 names, his 8 names, the 4 who embody conduct, and gatekeepers. The inner mandala is what in that combined practice you would imagine inside your head, the secret mandala what you imagine in your throat, and the very secret mandala what you imagine in your heart. In fact, in this tradition, there are entirely separate practices for each of these 4 mandalas. These have been lost. All of the texts were destroyed or lost during the Cultural Revolution. So all we have left is the combined practice, and that's what we do. We do the combined practice on the 10th day of every month here, and there is also, as most of you know, a daily form of that, which is somewhat simplified. So, for those who are following in the source text, the clear guidance, we begin on page 55. And for those who are using the text arranged for communal practice that you could download from the website, you begin wherever that is. The first stanza on the bottom of page 55 is the supplication of the Trikaya, or three bodies of Guru Rinpoche. Now, every Buddha is the Trikaya. We often treat the Trikaya as though there's a Dharmakaya Buddha somewhere, and there's Sambhogakaya Buddha somewhere else, and a Nirmanakaya Buddha somewhere else, because that's an easy way to think about it. But in fact, a Buddha is a Buddha is a Buddha. You can't be part Buddha. You're a Buddha or you're not a Buddha. If you're a Buddha, you've realized the Dharmakaya, you manifest the Sambhogakaya, and you also manifest the Nirmanakaya. So we can be a little bit misleading to ourselves when we say this Buddha is Dharmakaya, this Buddha is Sambhogakaya, and this Buddha is Nirmanakaya. To give you an example, the first line says Om Ahum, which in this case represents the body, speech, and mind of all Buddhas, as well as the Trikaya, through the blessing of the protector Amitabha. Now, in the sutras, Amitabha is presented, or boundless light, as a particular Nirmanakaya, a Buddha who, when he first generated bodhicitta, made the aspiration that upon his Buddhahood, he create a pure realm that was uniquely accessible to those who still have kleshas. And as a result of that aspiration, since that then Bodhisattva did achieve Buddhahood, as the Buddha we now call Amitabha, we can be reborn in his pure realm, Sukhavati. And it is arguably some say the only, but certainly the best known, completely pure realm into which an ordinary person like ourselves can be born. Any other completely pure realm requires the complete eradication of kleshas for birth, and probably more than that. And that's why we see throughout the various traditions of the Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism, there's so much emphasis on the Buddha Amitabha. So from the point of view of the sutras, he's basically presented as a Nirmanakaya. From the point of view of the Tantras, he is presented as Sambhogakaya. As we know, the Sambhogakaya fundamentally consists of 5 families. And from those 5, you can create infinite subdivisions or branches, but basically there are 5 wisdoms, 5 Buddhas, and so on. And of those 5, Amitabha is the wisdom of discernment. That is to say, he embodies that aspect of the Buddha's wisdom. Therefore, he is the true nature of the aggregate of perception and the true or pure nature of what we experience as the klesha of desire. Because perception and desire are distortions of the wisdom of discernment. Also, everything red is red because of Amitabha. We need to understand something. Vajrayana is not symbolic. It is literal. This is often left out in foreign cultures like America because it's a little too much for people. So Amitabha is not read to represent something. To quote a great Buddhist teacher and paraphrase, Amitabha is not red because roses are red. Roses are red because Amitabha is red. Everything red is a distortion in our impure reality of Amitabha. Fire, passion, intelligence, all of those things are distortions in our impure, convoluted reality of that great simplicity, which is Amitabha. So that's according to Tantra in general. Dzogchen, which is distinct from Tantra and superior to it, or sometimes we want to be diplomatic, we say it's the apex of Tantra. From that point of view, Amitabha is the Dharmakaya. He is more than just Sambhogakaya, more than just Nirmanakaya. He is the Dharmakaya because he is actually your true nature. So if you ask yourself the question, and we're told that this is how samsara began with the question, who am I, or what am I? If you ask yourself the question, who am I? The correct answer from the Dzogchen point of view is Amitabha. You are Amitabha. And if you say, no, I'm not Amitabha, I'm blah, 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 blah with blah, 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 blah. Well, blah, blah, blah with blah, blah, blah is your obscurations. It's like a golden statue covered with shit. You could say that you're a golden statue and ignore the shit. You have to deal with the shit. But if you say, I'm not Amitabha, I'm blah, 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 blah with blah, 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 you're basically identifying with your shit, not with your true nature. And the problems with that are twofold. First of all, that's not who you really are. And second of all, it's temporary. It's not going to last forever. Amitabha is not temporary. Amitabha is beginningless and endless. So the only difference between your Amitabha and anyone else's Amitabha is our particular obscurations. So if you want to think about, I want to be special, the only thing that makes us special is our nonsense. Our reality is far beyond being special. It's Amitabha. So Amitabha here is not only Guru Rinpoche's Dharmakaya, it is everyone's Dharmakaya. In this case, however, we're talking about Guru Rinpoche, who is a specific person who appears not because he has obscurations, but because he has the ability to be subversive. Guru Rinpoche's energy is what we would call enlightened subversiveness. It is the ability to appear in samsara and turn samsara inside out. If you understand this, you'll be able to understand these prayers, and if you don't, you won't. So through the blessing of the protector Amitabha, the wisdom of the minds of all victors, all Buddhas, arose as the Sambhogakaya, Vairochana Avalokita of the snows. No questions until I say.
I just want to know where we are.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. All right.
Because you're in a different book. And
Page 3.
Page 55.
Of that book.
Yeah,
Page
yeah.
3.
This is the
Page 3.
yeah. Okay.
Can you just say it online so people know?
Yeah, page 3. Page 3. Okay.
Thank you,
The this line is includes a whole bunch of things very, very quickly. First of all, we see that here the Sambhogakaya is referred to by a combination of two names. Vairochana, who is the, just as Amitabha is the Buddha of the Padma family, Vairochana is the Sambhogakaya Buddha of the Buddha or Tathagata family, and often therefore considered the primary or central Sambhogakaya. But here he's also combined with Avalokita, Chenrezig. And then there's something about snow. So we have to unpack all of this. The point being made here is, it sounds very complicated, but it's actually very simple. The point being made here is that Chenrezig, who we normally think of as a bodhisattva, is in fact the source of emanation of all Buddhas. As Karma Chamya Rinpoche wrote, even Vairochana, who is universally renowned as the primary or fundamental Sambhogakaya Buddha, is nothing but an emanation of Chenrezig. Now, because we're talking about Guru Rinpoche's Sambhogakaya here, and because Guru Rinpoche is, we could say, an incarnation of Chenrezig and Amitabha, it makes specific reference to it. So Vairochana and Avalokita or Chenrezig are in this context the same thing. Now, what's this about snow? In the English, it really sounds like this. There's a Catholic church in Socrates called Our Lady of the Snows or Mary of the Snows or something. It always makes me think of that. When the Sambhogakaya is explained in and of itself, in the sutras and some of the tantras, it's explained as a body so vast that in each of its pores are 1 billion pure realms. And in each of those pure realms are 1 billion universes. Also, the body of this Sambhogakaya, in this case Vairochana, holds in his hands a stack of lotuses, of 25 lotuses for some reason. And the 13th lotus, it's like a high rise, which is at the level of his heart, contains above each of the stamens, and also on top of each of the petals of the lotus, so above each part of the flower, contains a universe. And our universe, we're taught in the sutras, Mahayana sutras obviously, is one of those universes on the 13th, that 13th lotus. That is why the teachings of the mind of all Buddhas, Dzogchen, can be taught in this world. If you want to know more about this, you can read the first chapter of Jomulu Dutai's Treasury of Knowledge. First chapter in the first volume, so that would be the first chapter of Myriad Worlds in the English translation, which goes into the details. Now, the snow part is that each of the pores not only contains infinite universes, but also emits streams of icy cold scented water or perfumed water. And so sometimes this form of Vairochana is called Vairochana of the glacial lake or glacial streams and so on. So that's why, in case you're wondering why it says Vairochana Avalokita of the snows. So, what is the simple meaning of that? The simple meaning of that is compassion is everything. Compassion is, which is the fundamental expression of the wisdom of discernment, right? Compassion is the source of everything, all other manifestations. And what does compassion manifest as? Says the Nirmanakaya, the display of aspiration and bodhicitta. So compassion manifests as bodhicitta. And through aspiration as rebirth, in this case, of Guru Rinpoche. So to summarize this stanza, when you look at the central figures in this mandala, Guru Rinpoche in his form of he who overpowers all that appears and exists, above him the Chenrezig, and above him Amitabha, they're not three different beings, although you could perceive them that way. But they're you could think of them as the wisdom that is the source, the compassion that is the essence or life, and the manifest bodhicitta and its activity that is I guess we could say the infiltration of our impure reality of one being. Then the stanza continues, moving on to page 56. If I pray with the fierce yearning of devotion, unceasingly bless me with your compassion. Now, unfortunately, this sounds transactional. It is not meant to be. It's not like a deal. It's like, all right, Guru Rinpoche, if I pay you devotion, I would like to buy your compassion. It's not transactional. The idea is that Guru Rinpoche's compassion is constant, universal, and impartial. But to benefit from it, we have to consciously open ourselves to it. If we don't open ourselves to it, it can't enter us. We have, unfortunately, the ability fortunately, it's not perfect. There are always gaps. But we have considerable ability to shield ourselves against everything good. We have no ability to shield ourselves against things that are bad. But we're very good at shielding ourselves from everything good. The next stanza again reiterates the same Trikaya, but in the specific forms that they take in this mandala. So those of you who are familiar with the Guru Rinpoche daily practice and the 10th day practice will recognize these. Dhammakaya, beyond limits, boundless life and light. Amitabha in the sutras is given a much longer name, the Buddha of boundless light, life, and wisdom. So sometimes people ask about what's the difference between Amitayus, boundless life, and Amitabha, boundless light. Basically, they're the same Buddha, but it's two names, and often slightly two different appearances, but not always. Sometimes the same appearance will be given both names. Sambhogakaya, speech of the Ocean of Victors. Ocean of Victors, Jinasagara, Jalva Gyamtso, is the form of Chenrezig that we imagine above the head of Guru Rinpoche in the this particular Guru Sadhana. And then Nirmanakaya Buddha of the 3 times, Padmakara. The most common names in Sanskrit of Guru Rinpoche are 2, Padmasambhava and Padmakara. Padmakara appears to be, according to Jomgo Kongtrul the Great, what is translated into Tibetan as Pema Jungni. But Padmakara and Padmasambhava both indicate much the same thing: lotus origin or sourced from a lotus, and so on. I pray to the Lord who outshines appearances and existence. So this is this refers to the specific form of Guru Rinpoche to whom we're praying, and also who is in the center, who is the principle of the mandala, of the outer practice, and of the combined practice. So it is the form of Guru Rinpoche with which you're probably most familiar here, at any rate. For example, the statue upstairs. This would all be much easier. This morning would be much easier if we were upstairs, because we're going to be talking about the statues that are up there, but you can go up in between. The easiest way to recognize this form is it's the peaceful Guru Rinpoche with the usual lotus crown and so on, but his right hand holds a vajra not in front of his heart, either, I can't do this very well at the moment, but up into the sky, as he does in this case, or sometimes you'll see it down over his knee. And while he's still smiling, he's frowning at the same time. So he's smiling but frowning. And he is usually in this form, his legs are loosely crossed with what's called the posture of royal ease, where his right foot is in front of his left foot. They're not fully crossed in vajra posture. Outshines or overwhelms appearance and existence means that this Guru Rinpoche, this form of Guru Rinpoche, demonstrates his ability to overwhelm or overpower the inanimate world, what appears, and the animate world, those who come into being or seem to exist. So there is therefore a quality of protectiveness to this form. And this is often a form of Guru Rinpoche to which people pray when they pray for protection from dangers and so on. The next stanza and the stanzas after go one by one through 12 different forms of Guru Rinpoche. Now, in many mandalas of Guru Rinpoche, there are 12 forms, which in general, of course, correspond to the 12 syllables of his mantra, and also to his 12 deeds. As in this tradition, Guru Rinpoche is regarded as the reincarnation of Buddha Shakyamuni. And we'll talk about that in more detail on a later weekend when we go through this whole text. But therefore, like the Buddha, he has 12 deeds, but they're different, slightly different deeds, because his activity is distinct. Of these, 8 are the commonly known 8 names, and these are the ones who are depicted in the 8 mid-sized statues upstairs. The main statue is the he who overpowers all that appears and exists, And then there are 8 mid-sized statues, and then 27, well, plus, but smaller ones. The 8 mid-sized statues, people often call them the 8 emanations, but actually in Tibetan it's the 8 names, because it is the form taken by Guru Rinpoche under certain names or with certain epithets. And then after that, not depicted upstairs, there will be outside them in the mandala 4 additional forms who embody his extraordinary deeds. Now, the tricky thing about this prayer is it's kind of biographical in the sense of it recounts Guru Rinpoche's best known deeds, but it's not in biographical order. It's in the order that they appear in the mandala. So it's the form that's in the east, the form that's in the south, the form that's in the west, the form that's in the north, and then east south or southeast, and then west south, southwest, and then west north, northwest. Sorry, I have to translate it, and then east north, northeast. So the first one mentioned here is not even given the usual name. It's typically called the Vajradhara of Uddiyana, or Uddiyana Vajradhara. Uddiyana, of course, is an ancient kingdom. Most people who have an opinion think that it was probably Swat in Pakistan. There are other opinions and whatever. But anyway, it was where Guru Rinpoche appeared. Because he was adopted into the royal family and briefly held the throne, then he's sometimes referred to by the name of the country he ruled, the way in Shakespeare sometimes the King of England will be called England, and so on. So when we refer to Guru Rinpoche as Uddiyana, we're referring to him by the name of the then country by which where he appeared. So what is being described in this stanza is when Guru Rinpoche achieved the state of immortality, which he did in a cave called Maratika, along with his then consort Mandala. And although the events of that part of his life and his association with Mandala are said to have occurred in the region of Mandi or Ravasar in India, for some reason, most Tibetans identify that cave, Maratika, as being in Nepal. So I am not taking a position on this, but anyway, when people go to Maratika cave on pilgrimage, they go to the one in Nepal. So, but the rest of that part of the story takes place in Mandi. So, in any case, in that cave, he and Mandala meditated on the deity Amitaba, the longevity form of Amitabha, and had visions of Amitaba and achieved the state of Vidyadhara with control over longevity. So achieved a state of realization that in addition to realization gave them control over longevity. And that achievement is depicted as this form of Guru Rinpoche, who usually looks like Vajradhara, blue with holding a Vajra and bell and so on, with Mandala in his embrace as his consort. So if you wander upstairs during the break and you look at the 8 mid-sized statues, it makes them sound like cars, mid-sized, you'll see that there is one that is a Vajradhara-like figure with fangs, though, but otherwise Vajradhara-like, who is embracing his consort. And that's this form of Guru Rinpoche. So the text says, through the blessing of boundless life and wisdom, so through Amitabha, Amitaba's blessing, you accomplished an immortal Vajrapati. Padmakara and Mother Mandala, great embodiments of all victors, I pray to you. I pray to Padmakara Uddiyana. Then the next stanza describes another form of Guru Rinpoche that is Shakya Singha, or Lion of the Shakyas. Now, Lion of the Shakyas can sometimes refer to the Buddha himself, but in this case it refers to Guru Rinpoche as a monk. So this describes a point in his recorded life when, after leaving the kingdom of Uddiyana and spending time as a yogi wandering through charnel grounds, he then went to, in most accounts, Vajrasana, Bodh Gaya, and received a monastic ordination. In some accounts from Prabhahasti, in some accounts from the Buddha's cousin Ananda. And so this form, which is usually thought of as in the south of this utter mandala, says, with excellent bodhicitta aspirations and deeds, you observe the doctrine of the fourth guide in this fortunate kalpa. Buddha Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, is said to be the fourth of 1,000 Buddhas who will appear in this aeon. Rinpoche in a future life will be, I forget whether it's 256th or one of them. Anyway, it's in this, the descriptions of the tankas of the previous lives of Barway Dorjes, which I translated, and I don't have it, somebody has it, Debbie, somebody. And in that, one of them describes which Buddha he's going to be. It's predicted in the Sutra of the Good Kalpa. You observe the doctrine of the fourth guide in this fortunate kalpa. Your benefit of beings and the scope of your activity are those of a second teacher. Teacher in this sense, meaning the Buddha as the teacher with a big T, the founder of Buddhism as we know it. I pray to Shakya Singha, I pray to Padmakara Uddiyana. The next stanza refers to the form of Guru Rinpoche that is visualized in the West. Now, this is one of two forms who look like kings. And these two forms commemorate his accepting the throne, in one case of Uddiyana, where he first appeared, and in the other case of the country that was at the time ruled by Mandara's father, which again, according to Barway Dorje, is equivalent to Mandi in India now. So this is the form that, if you look upstairs, you'll see he's wearing a kind of turban with a tiara, and he's holding a damaru, playing a damaru in his right hand and a bell in his left. And it says, miraculously born, unstained by age and death, you possess the marks and signs. Born on a wondrous lotus lake, you accepted the throne. I pray to Padmaraj, the Dharma Chakravartin with perfect merit. I pray to Padmakara Uddiyana. So this refers to when he, after being discovered on a lotus flower on an island in the middle of a lake in Uddiyana by the king of Uddiyana, he was adopted by him as the prince and was enthroned. And in India and the Indian, let's say the Indian subcontinent to avoid a thorny issue, in the Indian subcontinent at that time, monarchs often retired and put their children on the throne. So, for example, the father of the current king of Bhutan is still alive, and at a certain point retired and allowed his son to be on the throne. Obviously, not all monarchies do this, But they did then. So when Guru Rinpoche ruled Udjana before leaving, according to some accounts, it was when he later returned. The biographies vary. But anyway, it doesn't necessarily mean that his adoptive father, Indrabhuti, had passed away. Then the next stanza, which refers to the form of Guru Rinpoche, who is in the north of the mandala, refers to Simhanada, or Sengye Drolo, the lion's roar. And this is the form that Guru Rinpoche took while debating at Vajrasana. And so he looks very much like the Bodhisattva Vajrapani in his fierce form. If you look upstairs, you'll see he's standing with his legs spread, holding a Vajra in his right hand, and I think his left hand is just making the threatening gesture. And he looks pretty fearsome. And this is Guru Rinpoche's embodiment as a person of unparalleled intelligence, truthfulness, and magical power. But the magical power here, understand, this is not about my spells beat your spells. It's the power of the truth. That's why he's called the lion's roar. The lion's roar represents telling the truth. In Buddhism, the idea is that the fearlessness of the teachings and proclamation of the teachings comes in the fact that they're true. You know, the truth is unassailable. We hope. So it says, you eradicated with miraculous, powerful ferocity, vicious, haughty Tirthakas hard to tame, those harming the holy Dharma. I pray to Sengye Drolo, I pray to Padmakara of Udjana. Okay. So that, in terms of, if we put it in order, that occurs. He defeats those who are debating against the Buddha's teachings in Bodh Gaya after having been a yogi, after having been a monk. And this is, in most accounts, fairly close to the time when he gets invited to Tibet. Then we turn to the southeast, and this is one of several yogi forms of Guru Rinpoche, and this one's called Rays of Sunlight, or Nyuma Uzen. And this is a form, if you look upstairs, you'll see his legs are loosely crossed. He's wearing mostly bone ornaments and a tiger skin skirt. And the actual iconography can vary a little bit, but with one of his hands, he's touching sun rays, and there's a sun somewhere attached to the statue. This one's always tricky to install because there are a lot of moving parts, so to speak. And so he's pointing to rays of sunlight. Often he's holding a katvanga staff with his left hand and pointing to the sun or rays of sunlight with his right hand. But I can't guarantee that's the way it is upstairs. It can vary. But this represents his achievement usually immediately after renouncing or abdicating the throne in Udjana. So he's found, he's enthroned, and then he leaves under a bit of a cloud, according to most accounts. He's sort of forced to leave, and lives in charnel grounds. Through disciplined conduct in the 8 charnel grounds and the great places, you brought all appearances and existence under your sway. Now, this term, disciplined conduct, is important. The term is tulshu. Tul means to tame, and shuk means to enter. So it means to tame your kleshas and to get into gear or enter into a proper mode of behavior. Therefore, in general, tulshu can refer to any code of authentic moral discipline. Here, when it says tulshu jichaba, the conduct of or disciplined conduct, it refers to being completely fearless. So, for example, the practice of chu or severance is considered a way to cultivate tulshuk jichoba, the conduct, disciplined conduct. And especially when a practitioner of severance tests the authenticity of their practice by going to a place they sincerely believe to be haunted and doing the practice there. That's the test. You know, it's very easy to get together at a Dharma center with the lights on and lots of other people around and practice severance. You know, you're mostly worrying about you know, the walking and chewing gum at the same time aspect of things with the big drum and the bell and sounding okay and so on. And then maybe you start practice the visualization. But when you really do it in a place that you believe to be haunted, you have to believe that it's haunted. You can't just go into a nice, you know, nicely maintained cemetery and do it unless you actually feel you're at risk. Because you're not doing anything. There's no resistance to overcome. That's tulshu jichoba. So the charnel grounds where Guru Rinpoche practiced were not like cemeteries that we have. These were charnel grounds where there would be dangerous predators, you know, and they have tigers and stuff like that in the subcontinent. I mean, and bears and whatever, you know, whatever wanted to eat corpses was there. And if you believe in spirits as external entities, then that's where they would be too, because some spirits like to possess corpses so they can, you know, do things that you need a body to do, and which are called Vedanta. And there are a lot of stories about that in India. And if you don't believe in that, you don't believe in that. But anyway, point is, charnel grounds, real charnel grounds are scary places. So through disciplined conduct in the 8 charnel grounds and the great places, you brought all appearances and existence under your sway. So note the recurrence of the theme of overpowering here. But understand that Guru Rinpoche's power is not that he's kind of like the biggest bully in the playground. Guru Rinpoche is not a bully. Guru Rinpoche's power is the power of the truth and the power of compassion. His power doesn't come from spells. His power comes from the fact that he's Chenrezig. You turn the Dharma chakra for the matrikas and dakinis. Matrikas, or mamot in Tibetan, are female beings who are almost like matriarchs of the spirit world. They can be enlightened deities, or they can be just very powerful, non-human, but somehow female spirits. But they have power and prestige in their realm and are very much like, as their name implies, matriarch. I pray to the feet of Nima Hizer, that's the form, and I pray to Padmakara Vajjana. So then the next form is another form of Guru Rinpoche as a monastic. And this is where he's shown wearing a pundit hat, robes, including the Indian monk's basketball shirt. If you notice, they wear the sleeveless shirt with little sort of southwestern tie that they have in the front. That's what monastics appear to have worn in India when the Tibetans encountered them. And he's often holding a skull cup filled with Amrita, which represents the wisdom of the teachings. And so sometimes he's in the teaching, his right hand is in the teaching mudra, and his left hand is holding out this Amrita of Dharma, and sometimes it's reversed, and I forget which way it is upstairs. And that's the form that's called Padmasambhava. So in the temples where the Sangha gathered, you studied and taught the holy Dharma Pitakas. The Pitakas are the baskets, the Vinaya, Sutras, and Abhidharma. You became foremost among all the learned and attained. I pray to Padmasambhava, I pray to Padmakrita Buddhyana. The next form mentioned Loten Chokse, Chokse is a Tibetan translation of a Sanskrit name that I had evidently not discovered when I translated this, which was 23 years ago. But it indicates intelligence, and Loden means intelligence. So Loden Chokse is generally Guru Rinpoche, again, as a teacher and scholar, like Padmasambhava, but here he's also shown as a king. So often this form is associated with his ruling. If the Padma Raja form is him as the ruler of Uddiyana, Loten Chokse is him as the ruler of Mandi. Because when the story of him and Mandala, as most of you probably know, is he shows up as an itinerant yogi in the kingdom of Mandi. Princess Mandala has refused to marry, which of course for a royal princess is a really big no-no and terrible disobedience, because your kids are pawns with which you can cement alliances and prevent wars and whatnot. And so her father allows her to live as a nun, but then somebody finds out that she's apparently shacking up with this itinerant yogi. Guess who that is? And so the father has them both burnt to death. And they survive the fire, and the fire turns into a lotus, and you know, the whole story. And then they go off and achieve immortality, implying that it sounds like they've already achieved it, but I guess there's levels of it. And so it's at that point that the father gives him his kingdom, because he realizes that he's done something wrong. Didn't occur to him that burning his daughter alive was wrong. But because they survived the fire, I guess I was wrong. Okay, so I'm sorry. I'll try and stay in my lane. So you mastered the external, internal, and supreme 5 sciences. The 5 sciences are in traditional Indo-Tibetan thought 5 main areas of knowledge. One of them is Dharma, both in the sense of a Buddhist and non-Buddhist Dharma or spirituality, but then they also include medicine, making, which includes art, construction, architecture, and all of it. It's all called Zoirikpa, which means the knowledge of how to making things. So we could say artifice, but that sounds nasty. And then logic and linguistics. And accomplish the truthful power of Dharanis and Vidya mantras. Dharanis, in the West, we think of Dharanis as long mantras, and often they are. Dharani really means spell, because Dhara means to hold. and Vidya mantras, awareness mantras, in the enlightened sense, of course, that is a wonderful thing, but it also means magical power. I pray to Lotan Chokse, the Guru of Brahmins, the supremely learned Rishi, and so on. And then we come to the last of the 8 names. And this name requires careful attention because this is the form of Guru Rinpoche who is most significant in the movement of Dharma from one culture to another. And this is also his most overtly subversive form. And this is Dorje Drolo. Probably most of you know how this form usually appears. He's the one that's biting his lower lip, standing on a tigress, raising a 9-pronged vajra, sometimes of meteoric iron, sometimes of gold, into the sky with his right hand, and brandishing a kila, a porba, with his left. And he's standing on a tigress. The story is that at one time Guru Rinpoche went into a retreat meditating on the deity Vajrakila in Bhutan. And in the company of a Bhutanese princess whose name was Tashi Chidran. And there were some things going on. There was resistance to Dharma and things affecting the well-being of people in general in both Bhutan and Tibet. It wasn't Bhutan then. I mean, it's all, we use modern names for these countries, but it's like a lot of the countries that we think of as the borders were different and the cultures were different. Anyway, so he turned into this form of Guru Rinpoche, and Tashi Chidran turned into a pregnant tigress, and he stood on top of the pregnant tigress. I don't think he was the father, and vanquished spirits. What does this actually mean to us? It represents, among other things, or embodies what a teacher like Guru Rinpoche has to do and be in order to get through to people. I think I can say this. I'm trying to stay in my lane here, but I also do have a job to do. So, to get through to people in a target culture, we have just as with languages, we have a source language and a target language when you translate. In the same way, when Dharma moves from one culture to another, as it did within the subcontinent, and then later has moved all over the world, what works in the source culture is not necessarily going to get through to people in the receiving culture, in the target culture. And it's not, obviously we could say that this is egregiously true in Dharma coming from Asia to other continents, such as Europe, the Americas, and Africa. But it's not simply that. It's even true in more subtle levels as well. And so the thing about the Drolo is that we'll get into it as we go through the stanza. In order to tame utterly vicious, haughty elementals, the 8 classes. The 8 classes are 8 legions, are 8 types of spirits. They're seen as legions of spirit forces. In Western legend, we have all the various legions of spirits or demons that Solomon used to do this and that and so on. And we find it in other legends as well. In the same way, in Indic legend, there are 8 legions, and they've been very much incorporated into the classification of spirits in countries that received Buddhism, such as Tibet, China, Japan, and so on. So in order to tame utterly vicious haughty elementals, the 8 classes and Samaya demons, your form is ferocious. I pray to Dorje Drolo itself. Well, first of all, the name. According to Jongul Cultural the Great, and the evidence of this is in the Terma of Barway Dorje, the name mantra of this form of Guru Rinpoche uses this Sanskrit form. Drolo is a semi-translation from Sanskrit into Tibetan of Krodha Loka Uttara. Krodha means wrathful or angry. It's funny, this word wrathful in English, we use it as though it's so much more dignified because it's in the Bible. And so we think that when we use wrathful, like wrathful deities, it doesn't mean angry. The word wrathful just means angry. I mean, when you list the 7 deadly sins, it lists wrath as one of them. It's not like wrath is good. But because it occurs in the Bible, somebody at some point in the 1960s or before decided it would be a good thing to call our fierce deities wrathful deities. But they're not actually wrathful because they're not angry. Buddhas don't get angry. We get angry, which is a problem. Buddhas don't get angry. They can look angry, but they don't get angry. If they get angry, they're not Buddhas. So people have suggested saying fierce deities, but everybody's so used to the peaceful and wrathful deities that it's just kind of grandfathered in like a lot of other mistranslations. So Krodha, Loka means the world in the sense of a realm or the world we live in and so on. Uttara means above or beyond, like the Uttara Tantra Shastra, the higher or highest continuum. So Loka Uttara or Loko Uttara, because Sanskrit does that, it means beyond the world. So he's wrathful in his sort of transmundane way. In other words, he's not really angry. He just looks that way, but he does look that way. Now, sometimes people talk about how they'll say the very wrathful form of Guru Rinpoche, or the most wrathful form of Guru Rinpoche, and so on, as implying that it's some sort of competition, as though you've got the wrathful Guru here, but Drolo, he's more wrathful. He'd win if you put them in the ring. Sure, he would. Forgive me, but they're missing the point. It's not about degrees of ferocity. It's about unpredictability. And I'm going to quote without attribution several Buddhist teachers here, because for one thing, Drolo, not in all forms, but typically is biting his lower lip. Most Indic wrathful, Buddhist wrathful forms, they're baring their fangs. Here he's biting his lower lip, which is more characteristic of a Tibetan local deity. And the idea is he's speaking the language of the spirits of the country. He's taking a form they can recognize. He's also wearing his robes wrong. Drolo is often shown, as you'll see upstairs, and I don't know if they got the robes wrong. I remember when the statue first arrived, there were some things that did wrong that Rinpoche thought were hilarious and had to be recast. For one thing, they gave the pregnant tigress balls. Rinpoche said the whole point is it's female and it's pregnant. It shouldn't have balls. So we had to do something about that. But anyway, and I don't know if the robes are right or wrong, but Drolo, the robe, the shawl should be over the wrong shoulder. One thing that no Buddhist will ever do is wear their shawl over the right shoulder, exposing their left hand and covering the right arm. Everybody, male or female, monastic, non-monastic, whatever shawl, if you wear a shawl, that's how you wear it. Everybody knows this, except for Drolo. Guru Rinpoche in that form, it's on the wrong shoulder. It's just wrong. It's basically wrong. So what is it? It's unpredictability and confusion. As a great Buddhist teacher said, when Buddhism is brought from one culture into another, if you attempt to overpower the receiving culture, to somehow bully it, in other words, instead of responding to people's legitimate resistance, but you attempt to just shut them down, it's going to turn into a pissing contest, which you're never going to win because they're on home ground. If you're dealing with opposition that is unreasonable, if it's reasonable, then you just respond with reasonable argument. But if you're dealing with unreasonable opposition, you don't try to beat it down or shut it down. You have to be confusing. Because as long as you meet expectations, you're under the control of the unreasonable resistance. And so Drolo, that's why his robes are on wrong. And so the idea is that this, in legend, the spirits, what is this? Is it a local deity? Is it a monk? Is it a siddha? And he has earrings of conch. The only other figure in Buddhist iconography, well, there are many, 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 but the best known other figure who has earrings that really stick out that way is Bodhidharma in the Chinese and Japanese Chan and Zen tradition, who is, hello, coincidence, also a person bringing a tradition from one culture to another. I'm not going to take it further than that, but so there's a quality of unpredictability. And this brings us to one of the most controversial aspects of Guru Rinpoche and of our, we're going to be late for lunch, and of our tradition. And that is the concept that here, say the amok or amok. I grew up saying amok, even though it's spelled amok, but I've heard people say amok. So whatever, the amok, wrathful king, the all-surpassing slayer of Maras. Amok is chola. The word I translated amok. Amok is amok, but I translated chola. And chola means off the track. Not just off the beaten track, but kind of like losing your, it can mean a form of error, deviation, deviant, could be translated as chola. And this term chola is what occurs in this term that people that now don't like to use in the West anymore, the Yeshe chola, crazy wisdom. The crazy is chola. It's not nyumpa. Nyumpa, crazy in Tibetan is nyumpa. But there's a good reason why this was translated, crazy wisdom at that time. But what it means is, among other things, when the wisdom of Guru Rinpoche is not predictable. It is not, we cannot put it in a box. We can't, we can't control it. You know, we have this idea that we want to take our teachers and package them the way we want them to be. You know, it's ironic that those who oppose our tradition call it Lamaism because we worship our lamas. But actually, I would call it disciplism because we abuse our teachers. We control them. We tell them what to do. You sit here, you go there, you teach this time, you do that. So this Yeshe Cholwa is refusing to be controlled that way. Because when we control the medium or the media through which a teacher manifests, we are controlling their message. And that is how we prevent, perhaps with the best of intentions, although I would question that, to be honest. But that is how we prevent the transmission of authentic Dharma from one culture to another. As long as we can control, we invite, you know, Tibetans and Sikkimese and Bhutanese and, you know, just within this tradition and then other traditions, whatever. And we can, but we put them in a certain, we try to train them like bonsai, you know, we prune them, we train them, we teach them how to, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be ethical accountability. I'm not getting into that area at this point. But we have to accept the fact that we cannot control the venue or the media associated with our teachers' teaching without distorting and limiting the message. And we need to be very, very careful. And I don't believe there's simple answers to this. We need to be very, very careful in our, each of us as individuals, not just our, you know, culture, in how we do that. So for that reason, Trolut, among all the many forms of Guru Rinpoche, has been progressively more and more emphasized. As the centuries go on, more and more termas have, so the Barway Dorje has a separate cycle that's just devoted to Trolut. And famously, of course, in the Nyingma tradition, the Dorje Rinpoche, the previous Dorje Rinpoche, and the previous Dorje Rinpoche both had famous Trolut cycles. And in the Karma Kagyu tradition, the principal form of Guru Rinpoche meditated on is the Trolut of Yonggi Minja Dorje, which His Eminence Minja Rinpoche has finally begun to disseminate to his disciples in an appropriate way, you know. And so as things have degenerated over time, the political situations effect on Dharma and so on, there's been progressively more and more emphasis on this. So Trollo is also connected with the survival of the true teachings outside of ephemeral institutions. So, all right, we'll finish up with this. The last four mentioned here are four aspects of Guru Rinpoche that are associated with the four main types of lifestyle that he demonstrated. That's why they're called the four who demonstrate or embody conduct. And these are outside the ring of 8. You've got one in the east, then the south, then the west, and the north, and so on. So the first is Guru Rinpoche, having been found by the king of Uddiyana, adopted into the royal family. So it says Miraculously born in the center of an unborn lotus, you dispelled the king of Udyana's lack of an heir. The king of Udyana in Drubhuti had no heir. And so he was delighted when he found Guru Rinpoche. You protected the unprotected from hunger, thirst, and poverty. I pray to Jelbu Torchokchen, which means prince with a top knot. And we don't have a statue of this form, but you'll see it on the tankas that show the various forms of Guru Rinpoche in our tradition, such as the refuge tanka. And he's shown with a vajra in his right hand and a jewel in his left, because the legend says that the king had emptied his treasury in making offerings and trying to alleviate the poverty of his people. And so Guru Rinpoche, the story is, he just spat into the king's palm, and a wish-fulfilling jewel emerged from that restored the king's eyesight, because he'd also lost his eyesight, and refilled his treasury, and so on. The second of these four in the south is, again, Guru Rinpoche as an itinerant yogi wandering through the charnel grounds. So this is after he's been banished from Udyana for the first time. Although you had already attained great supreme siddhi, you tamed all beings using the 8 common siddhis. A vast area was filled with your miracles of discipline. I pray to Shantarakshita. Now, Shantarakshita is more famously the name of the abbot Shantarakshita, guardian of peace, who founded both the middle way philosophical tradition and the monastic tradition in Tibetan Buddhism. And the lineage of monastic vows from Shantarakshita has continued through the Nyingma and Gelug traditions. But here it's the same name, but referring not to the Bodhisattva abbot, as he's often called, Shantarakshita, but to Guru Rinpoche as a yogi in the charnel grounds. So this form, he's a pale yellow, and he's shown holding a Katvanga staff in his right hand and a kapala filled with Amrita in his left. And then the third one in this outer perimeter is Guru Rinpoche as a monk debating. It says, to restore the victor's teachings, you tamed the vicious. You were emanated as a son of magical skill. With magical power, you ground the doctrine's enemies into dust. I pray to Demchok Duchi Nyingpo. Now, Demchok, of course, usually refers to the deity Chakmasambhara, or Paramasuka, literally. Here it's a personal name. And Duchi Nyingpo means the essence of time. This form of Guru Rinpoche is shown as pink in color because he embodies the activity of attraction. And he's wearing monastic robes, including a pundit hat, and is debating. And you know he's debating because he's smacking his left hand with his right hand. He was about to, depending upon the specific image, which is the gesture that you make when you make a philosophical point. You emphasize it by smacking your hand in that way. And then the fourth one is again Guru Rinpoche in the charnel grounds, but engaged in extreme behavior of extreme discipline. Through the profound view and conduct of secret mantra, union and liberation, you receive siddhi and nourishment from the Amrita of corpses. The idea is that he could transform corpses into something edible and nutritious. You eradicated those with and without form who held wrong views. I pray to Dorje Drolo. Dorje Drolo is, or literally Vajra Rudra. Tsal, of course, means power in these cases. Dorje Drolo is a name that is sometimes applied to a wrathful form of the peaceful Guru Rinpoche, often applied to a wrathful form of Guru Rinpoche other than Drolo. And in this case, he's not as wrathful as he sounds. If you actually look at the tanka, you'll see he's a slightly frowning form, but he's light green in color. And he's got a corpse, a little convenient hand-sized corpse in his left hand, and he's got a flaying knife in his right hand, a hooked knife we usually call them, it sounds nicer. And he's so that he can open up the corpse and turn it. And this, of course, is a reference to a certain type of practice called Bomdrup, or corpse accomplishment, which don't try at home. And then we have, finally, in this prayer, we have the deities at the perimeters. Now, this is where I said at the beginning that the four mandalas described in these four prayers correspond to the outer mandala, familiar to those who do these practices, and then the mandalas inside your head, throat, and heart, respectively. The exception to this is that when these mandalas are practiced as entirely separate sadhanas, they have different individuals at the perimeters as gatekeepers. So here it mentions the dakinis. So in the outer practice, when it's only the outer practices, the gatekeepers are four dakinis. That's why in the combined practice, the gatekeepers are three sets. You've got viras, then dakinis, and then kimkaras, or messengers. So it says you guard the mandala's perimeter and the external and internal places. The places are sacred places, pilgrimage places. In India, there are 24. Internal means that they also correspond to specific places within your body. Mothers, sisters, and dakinis born from wisdom and activity, and all the deities in the mandala of the Guru and the three roots. I pray to you, Lord, and in my place all my hopes, and so on. And then so the idea of this first prayer is that although for us it's very arcane, because the biography that it refers to is so beyond what we're used to, that it's hard to think of it as biography. The idea here is a biographical supplication, where you pray to a teacher in recollection of their great deeds. And the reason for biographical supplication is that the reason you have devotion for someone is because of what they have done. Fundamentally, devotion comes from gratitude and appreciation. And so in order to bring out your devotion in this type of prayer, you pray to Guru Rinpoche in this case, or any Guru, with reference to what they did that you found so touching, so worthy of appreciation or gratitude. And that's why in this outer mandala and this outer prayer, we pray to these 13 forms of Guru Rinpoche, plus the gatekeepers, plus his Dharmakaya and Samudrakaya form. And then the concluding aspiration, may I and all sentient beings of the six types from now until we reach the essence of awakening, not fall under the power of obstacles or maras, not be deceived by kleshas or samsara companions, complete the quick path Guru Sadhana, and in one life see the face of Vidyadhara Padmakara and attain the result perfect Buddhahood. Notice the emphasis on prevention here, the prevention of obstacles. So another aspect of this outer supplication is you're praying to Guru Rinpoche as someone who can protect you from losing your way and from corruption, internal and external corruption. And so that's another reason why so many of the figures in this outer mandala are seen as forceful or fierce, because you're praying for protection. So that's the first of the four. I'd like to stop here, and then at 2, we'll continue with the second of the prayers, which is a little shorter and easier to describe. So hopefully we'll have time for questions. I'd rather, since there are 4 prayers to go through and 4 sessions, I'd rather do one each session and take questions at the end of the session when there is time, than try and rush through everything and then take questions at the end. So to conclude, since this is not the last session, please we'll recite just the first stanza on page 7 as dedication. Sunam diye tamche zikpa nye tomne nyepe rana pamje chega nache palap chungba sibe sol rowa rowa. Thank you.